Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Backups Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Seb Burnett, and I'm here with my co-host, Tex. Say hello.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, good times. We got a good show coming to you today. God, the season is coming up so fast. Like it's like football is back right now, but it's not quite there because it's preseason. I mean, but preseason's also really good for us because we get to see all the draft picks that we've talked about for the last 3 years actually get some playing time. And it's pretty interesting. There have been some ups, there have been some downs, but I've enjoyed the preseason so far. How about you, Tex?
Yeah, we're in the thick of it, man, and I think you really hit the nail on the head. Getting to watch these players blossom in front of our eyes, and honestly, some of them are busting right in front of our eyes. And I never thought I'd see a player bust right in front of my eyes.
Busting like Robbie Anderson, baby.
Busting right in front of my eyes. Ronald Jones. Right before our eyes, just So
he's jonesing for some talent. That's what he's jonesing for. Yeah, we got a good show coming at you today. We're going to discuss a little quick mention of the hard knocks that's going on with the Cleveland Browns right now. One of my favorite stories is happening in the NFL as we speak, and then we're going to give you our top 5 studs and duds for this year of upcoming fantasy football. Tex and I are definitely balls deep in fantasy football right now, just doing mocks all day, just talking about players. We hate players one day, we love them the next, and vice versa. It's been hilarious. And yeah, so Tex,
what's up, dude?
Let's do this shit.
Ready, set, hold on tight, folks. We're bringing in the Backups. It's the Backups Podcast with your hosts, Seb and Professor Tex. Let's do this thing.
So, Tex, are you a fan of Hard Knocks? Is this like something that you normally watch like every season?
No, I don't watch it every season. I am a Dallas Cowboy fan, so I did watch it the 2 times that the Dallas Cowboys were on Hard Knocks. I think I really can't remember, spotty here and there over the past few years, but when the Browns were announced, I instantly fell in love because you and I have been basically riding the Browns gravy train from a little bit over a year. So here we are, man. But yeah, I've definitely been watching it so far this season.
Yeah, me too. I've actually really enjoyed it because we've done so much theory work on how this team is going to work with different personalities coming through and whatnot. I think that's kind of something we were definitely both looking forward to, and seeing the talent on the field. Some of the bigger high points that we've seen was the Corey Coleman episode, which depicted him in his condo with how many pairs of shoes?
I mean, the dude, I think he had I don't even know if this is a stretch, 1,600 pairs of shoes, right?
Yeah, it was insane. It's way too much. And then, so a big complaint that the coaches have been talking about, and something that you've seen in camp so far this year, is that Corey Coleman's work ethic is just not there. He's relied solely on his athletic ability and being the number 1 pick coming into camp. And the issue is that with this team, that's not going to fly. Even with Josh Gordon sitting out, it's not going to fly, because what they did this year was in the 3rd round, they drafted one of my favorite players coming into the draft. He had some off the field issues, obviously, but just ridiculously talented. It was Antonio Callaway. And Tex, what did you think of what Callaway's done so far in camp?
Super impressive. If you watch Hard Knocks, I highly suggest you do. But if you've been watching it, I am very encouraged by the way that Todd Haley pulled Jarvis Landry to the side, a guy who's had his own laundry list of off the field issues happen, and basically said, "Hey, listen, Larry Fitzgerald would take Galloway under his wing, so I guarantee you he would do it. You need to do the same thing." And while Josh Gordon is not in camp during those first 2 weeks of Hard Knocks filming, he's in camp now. He just entered camp a few days ago. He is a physical freak. We've been talking about him for months, so I don't need to necessarily touch too much on that. But I'm encouraged by what he has shown. It is remarkable the amount of talent this kid has, and if he can get his head screwed on straight. If you watch the show, I don't want to give too much away, but Todd Haley essentially says, bring this kid into your home. You just bought a house. Like, this kid, after watching him play, there is no mistake you can see the talent. The talent is instantly translating onto the field. And if they can bring somebody like that to play underneath Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, Josh Gordon, Duke Johnson, and the stable of running backs, it's so encouraging, guys. Never have you ever heard, had so much excitement of a 1-32 team over the past 2 years.
Yeah, I'm absolutely excited. Just that little post route that Antonio Callaway caught that touchdown on was like a 50-something yard touchdown, just a little shake and bake on there. But he's enough of an athletic specimen to where he was gonzo, and it's just really interesting. My favorite part, like, he does have off the field issues, and there was a whole controversy about the cop stopping him, and like he had I think a roach in the car, but he had just gotten his car, he said, from down in Florida. So who knows, like, the actual story there or who to believe? I believe in the, innocent until proven guilty theory. And I think that absolutely they made the right decision with his punishment, which was he played the entire game.
That kid, good grief, man. It's funny when the other team you're playing, those guys are like, feeling bad for you when you're exhausted and you're still contributing. It says a lot about him.
Oh yeah, like he made the touchdown catch after it was the third, fourth quarter, and he'd been playing the entire game.
Yeah. 78% of the snaps he played, which is a lot.
That's so many. And it was just I actually really liked that that's what they did. That was the punishment. And, people were pissed about it, saying they should have held him out. And I think they were probably just all Giants fans and AFC North fans because they saw how ridiculous this wide receiver core could be. And I know Tex and I discussed them possibly signing Dez Bryant, but it doesn't look like that's going to be a thing now.
You know what? And they probably, from a fan's perspective, depending on which side you lie on, they probably don't need to do that. It's not in the best interest. It might not necessarily further the team. It could, take a step back, especially with his personality and whatnot and what he could do to that locker room and what they're trying to build. They have enough personality in the locker room as it stands with Josh Gordon and Jarvis Landry. And now, you add Galloway into the mix. You've got some young guys in there that are looking to become leaders, and they need the right veterans in that locker room. I'm on either side of it. If they brought him in, I think from a fan's perspective, I would absolutely love it. They don't bring him in. There's obviously a reason for that. And I think it's also pretty telling that here we are 2 weeks away from the start of the NFL season, and Dez Bryant is still unsigned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that shows a lot. And I just want to mention one of my other favorite moments of Hard Knocks so far is that before the first game of the preseason, it was between the Browns and the Giants, and Odell Beckham Jr. and Baker Mayfield met at midfield and just had a little conversation. And I don't know, man. I just loved it for whatever reason. It just seemed really kind of wholesome. Odell Beckham Jr. asked Baker where the wifey was, and I don't know. It just made me feel really good for some reason. It made me feel better about Odell Beckham Jr.
Well, so this is what I think about Odell. Diva, 100%, but I feel like somehow, some way, the maturation process of Odell Beckham was sped up by a year or two. I don't know how it happened, but I know that people like Dez Bryant, Ocho Cinco, Terrell Owens had a very tough time reaching the point outwardly, right, that Odell seems to be in. This is a guy that was fighting for a contract and essentially bucked the system. I don't know who his inner who's in his inner circle, but whoever is advising Odell right now, should get a lot of credit, assuming that he's leaning on people from the outside, because it just doesn't seem very Odell Beckham-esque. So the fact that he's in camp, he's not causing a distraction. He looks as focused as he can be. He's healthy. He looks like a different person. he's still Odell. He's still that marketable, that tier one athletic freak, but he's not. He hasn't been the distraction that we've seen the previous 2 years. I don't know. This is year 4, so I'm totally down with Odell.
Yeah, I definitely think getting him, I would be totally cool with snagging him at the end of the first round of any fantasy draft at this point. 100%. What are the other, my personal favorite stories so far from this offseason and the preseason games? I'm pretty sure Tex can figure out what I'm going to talk about right now, but is Mr. Irrelevant 2017 Chad Kelly? No, 16.
2000 it was last year.
Was it last year, or was it when we were in?
No, I think. Let me go and look it up real quick.
It's all good. No, but for those of you that don't know, Chad Kelly was he had a tumultuous college career. He was booted from Clemson. He went and played at junior college. He got injured his senior year at Ole Miss. Has a lot of talent. Just had some off the field stuff. But he ran onto the field to defend his brother in some high school fight or something along that line. Which, I mean, when it comes to your brother, and if you're a hothead anyway, it's a recipe for disaster.
2017, Mr. Irrelevant.
Okay, so for those of you that don't know, Mr. Irrelevant is the last pick of the NFL draft, which oftentimes it's like a kicker or a wide receiver from a D3 school, essentially, and they're called Mr. Irrelevant because most of the time they're irrelevant. Careers.
It's a period on the draft, right? It's an afterthought. It's typically it's a draft pick that's traded away. I mean, the darlings of the draft essentially are the first 1, 2, potentially 3 rounds, and then anybody after that makes a name for themselves either in training camp or a year or two down the line when they play themselves into a position. You have Mr. Irrelevant was really a tagline to just in the draft. I mean, how do you announce the last player selected in any given, year's draft? So they're Mr. Irrelevant because 99.9% of the time they are irrelevant. They are an afterthought, so many players.
Yeah. And I specifically remember telling Tex, I was like, look, dude, I think Chad Kelly 100% has the potential to be a thing.
To be the most successful Mr. Irrelevant and actual successful player to go on.
Yeah. And I think he's honestly, even where he is at this point, I think it's considered a success. At the base of everything, the Broncos now have their backup quarterback. He's beat out Paxton Lynch, which, don't get me wrong, I think a kindergarten girl that wants to be a boy wearing a tutu and high, I don't know, something could probably beat out Paxton Lynch, because apparently Paxton Lynch just has no idea how to do reads on the field. Everything I'm reading saying, he's just, even having been in the league for as long as he has, he still can't make reads on the line at all.
Well, he's lazy, and that's come out. But I think with Chad Kelly, when you come into camp as Mr. Irrelevant, you come into camp with absolutely zero respect. You have to fight for everything that you get. You're buried on the depth chart, and I say buried because for 2 reasons. Number one, there was not a clear-cut veteran. It's not like you're going in under a Tom Brady, a Peyton Manning, a Drew Brees, something like that. You're literally buried under Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler, and Paxton Lynch. You're buried under guys that literally they have.
Yeah, and the coaches, Tex, you sent me an article today. God, it made me so happy, just ridiculously happy. And what they were talking about was, it was essentially about Chad Kelly and just how fantastic he's been so far, and his quest to beat out Paxton Lynch, and it's been insane. They say, he does stumble occasionally, which is, perfectly fine. He's in his second year, and it's not like he's had a ton of reps, but he's a playmaker. If you've watched him in this preseason, that's what he does. Is he goes on the field, and if something happens, and if it breaks down, if it's a dirty play, broken play, he somehow is able to right the ship, find his open receivers, make a play on the field. And that's what he's had to do. And it's honestly been one of my favorite parts of the entire preseason. And because, number one, I love to feel vindicated. Anyone that listens to this knows I love some of that sweet, sweet vindication. But especially with Mr. Irrelevant. Because Case Keenum, if Chad Kelly continues to excel, continues to make something of himself, put his nose to the grindstone even more, show up an hour earlier to camp, to practice, just do it, completely throw himself into this, the Broncos could save $11 million next season by cutting Case Keenum. Do you do it? That's the biggest question here.
Yeah, but here's the thing. $11 million in terms of a starting quarterback is pennies on the dollar, right? If you look at last year, Jay Cutler earned
10.
10? I thought it was 14.
No, it's 10.
Okay, that's still not a lot of money.
Sure.
They could still keep Keenum for one more season and park Chad Kelly on the bench, or at least make him come and fight for the job outright and actually make Keenum potentially, work for his job. I definitely, think that there's an opportunity for Chad, and the Broncos have made it. They've left the door open for him, right? Like Paxton Lynch is an afterthought. Brock Osweiler understands that he's a backup. And even though, yes, I do understand he's with the Dolphins, but for the Broncos perspective. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a little bit of an opening for Chad Kelly, right? So
yeah, well, and my point with the cutting him thing is that say Case Keenum comes in here and the Minnesota Vikings thing, which, there's a sect of people that believe this is the case, was just a fluke. It was a perfect situation. So he goes into this Broncos situation, and for some reason he doesn't excel. He doesn't exceed expectation or do at least what he did last year. Like, they go into camp kind of on even ground. Chad Kelly just continues to do what he has been doing, which is be a gunslinger, make plays. Like, when the play breaks down, Chad Kelly excels right then. Like, that's where he's done well, is buying time for himself in the pocket and then getting it to playmakers with good throws. I mean, yeah, he had a pick, but it wasn't it didn't.
It's preseason.
It was him. It's preseason. He hasn't had a ton of reps. And my thought was, look, like, he was gunslinging. That's what he's going to do, and that's just part of it. And he was relying on his arm a little too much in that play, and that's going to happen, and that's okay. And yes, I completely understand that he is going against like third stringers and second stringers and beyond that, but he's also playing with those same people. And one of his favorite targets is this preseason has been Cortland Sutton, which
Yep.
I think. Yeah, I think, he's a physical freak, and I think having a young Chad Kelly who is working his ass off to make a name for himself, having a young Cortland Sutton wide receiver to pair him with is a really good situation. And also Royce Freeman.
Yeah, and you know what? This could be one of those drafts that really turned it around for John Elway, who I felt for a long time was on the hot seat. Because of the handling of their previous quarterbacks. They made the right move. They didn't reach for a quarterback this draft, and they picked up Bradley Chubb, who has looked really good in preseason. They hit a home run out of the park. This is you and I speaking now on Royce Freeman. It looks like he is going to be a great, valuable asset to that team, and not a high draft pick. And then, being able to have Chad Kelly potentially fight for a starting job either at the end of this season, depending on how it goes. Because, I mean, let's face it, the Broncos are not shy about pulling a starter if they feel that he's not, leading the team in the right direction, or potentially maybe coming in next season as a third year quarterback and fighting for the starting job. So
how much credit would you give John Elway if Chad Kelly ended up being like a top 15 quarterback in the league?
Here's my thing. I don't know if I would necessarily give John Kelly that much credit, and here's why.
Elway.
Or, yeah, not John Kelly. Sorry, Elway. John Elway credit, and here's why. It's a throwaway pick. He's not supposed to produce. Okay, so you don't give John. The only thing he gets credit for is the fact that he picked them. But Chad Kelly could have signed anywhere. They just said, hey, with this final pick, let's just, grab a quarterback that has to be with us. And if it turns out that he, ends up doing okay, great. If not, he's the Mr. Irrelevant, right? Like, I don't, if Elway would have picked him in the, first 4 or 5 rounds, I could give him that, but not the 7th and the last pick in the 7th round.
Right.
Even a practice squad, you still have to do some sort of convincing on the practice squad because there's discretion. They get to pick where they want to go. Why would you pick the Broncos versus anyone else? You're being pitched that, hey, Chad Kelly, you have an opportunity. The Mr. Irrelevant pick is no pitch. That's just that you got picked. Anything. Yep. There's a lot of players that don't make it the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round. They get cut. They're just saying that they want the first pick, the first opportunity to look at you. So I don't really put much on that. I put a lot of this on Chad Kelly and potentially, the offensive coordinator or the quarterback coach and whatnot, because this is Chad Kelly coming in and putting, the time and effort into learning the offense and grooming himself when nobody is watching. So to kind of take that away from Chad, I think me personally, I wouldn't put it on much on Elway. That's just my opinion.
No, I 100% agree. I think the credit to this point, and if he succeeds, it's for Chad Kelly. I would 100% give Elway props for playing him and giving him the opportunity, recognizing the work and the development and the success and the fact that he's excelled. But the fact for the exhalation itself, I would give that credit to Chad Kelly.
Very well said. I was going to come back to that and say, listen, if Elway were to come in and actually make that sort of decision sometime this season that he felt that it needed to happen, maybe Keenum wasn't getting it done, or it's just a move that needed to happen, and he went with it, he better stick with it. But I think if he were to do that, that's when he should get some credit. But we're not to that point yet. Right now, We're seeing very young, and I'll put it to you like this. Tony Romo sat on the bench for, I want to say, 2 or 3 years before he had the opportunity to come in. Yep. And it could be apples to oranges a little bit, but sit Chad for another at least half the season, if not the full season. Let's see what he's got coming into next year.
God, I would love that so much. That would be one of my favorite stories probably ever.
Yeah, that's definitely it.
Yeah,
that kind of, brings us to, you go from studs to duds, right? Where we're talking about players that are irrelevant, that maybe have been drafted pretty high, and studs that come from nowhere and end up, doing pretty well on teams. And you and I are, we're fantasy football nerds out the yin yang. And so I thought it would be a pretty cool final segment to do something called Studs versus Duds. Very nonchalant. You pick 5 studs and duds. I pick 5 studs and duds. Just for the premise of how we are calculating these, in my opinion, we're doing them. Duds are going to underproduce from their current ADP or their current ranking, and studs are going to overproduce. It could be a few spots. It could be a few rounds. But this is just kind of players that Seb and I both feel will be a little bit better until, their stock is rising and might drop off a little bit. And somebody that you could potentially pass on and grab someone with a little bit higher of a ceiling at this point.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's start that out. Let's start off with our 5 studs. Why don't you give me your number 1?
My number 1 stud he's rising up the boards. It's Alvin Kamara. I've been super high on him. He's one of those names that is kind of polarizing right now in the fact that some people love him and some people say, oh no, his production is unsustainable. I compared him earlier whenever you and I were speaking to CJ2K.
Which is such a good comparison. Like, I didn't even make it. Yeah, that's really good.
So, when CJ2K came out, undersized, yes. Speedster, yes. Can catch the ball, yes. Was in an okay offense, but really had to be the bell cow, an untraditional bell cow, yes. I feel like Alvin Kamara really fits a lot of that mold. He's coming into a second year. He really burst onto the map. He is undersized. He's super fast. But I think he's got superstar written all over him, and not just because of Mark Ingram. If you remember last year, he was rookie of the year, or offensive player of the year, with splitting carries with Mark Ingram. So I think these first 4 games are going to do. They're going to be a lot of growth for Kamara, but I really do think that he will overproduce. And I actually put him in my rankings over Barkley right now. I know Barkley is a lead bell cow in New York, but my stud is I'm ranking Kamara over Barkley. So that's one of my guys. Who do you have?
Okay. I'm going for kind of a lesser, but my number 1 guy to talk about is Kerryon Johnson.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. I liked him a lot coming out of college. He was at Auburn, and he just absolutely torched the Georgia Bulldogs in that first game that they played. He had some issues with injuries and whatnot, but as long as he's healthy, whenever he was healthy, he just was an absolute stud. The backfield in Detroit is busy. It's hectic. They have Theo Riddick, who's notably probably, I would say, the best pass catching tight or running back in the league, top 5 at least. He's incredible. They have LeGarrette Blount, so the Detroit Lions are going to win a Super Bowl. And they have Amir Abdullah, who's, I would definitely say, kind of dudded out his career, right?
I would even potentially go as far to say he might get cut. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could definitely see that happening because from everything I've heard, Amir Abdullah has had a good preseason, but that's kind of always been the thing, is he has a good preseason and then he gets hurt in the first 3 games / does nothing. But an issue with that is that offensive line last year for Detroit was atrocious. They were not good.
Done a lot to improve that offensive line.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they did. And I think that was a big thing, man. They picked up Frank Ragnow and Tyrell Crosby, 2 really good prospects coming out. I think Kerryon Johnson, he's getting a lot of work in the preseason, both in the run game and the pass game. He has looked good. He has excelled. I definitely think that he could have a much, because he's getting picked in the 7th or 8th round generally, pretty far back.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that he definitely belongs in that 5th to 6th round, and he could definitely give you those type of numbers throughout the season, just in that high-powered offense, which is something you always look for. Matt Stafford's going to have himself a year, and I think having a dual threat running back with as much talent as Kerryon Johnson will really, I think Matt Patricia will love it.
Yep, I like that. I like that a lot. Another one of my studs is going to be, and again, I'm going to list this person over 2 other people, but he's making a lot of waves right now, is Christian McCaffrey. I was really bullish on him a few weeks ago. I had an opportunity really to sit down and watch not only some film from him last year, but just seeing his vision, his speed, his opportunity that he has with the Panthers this year. I like Christian McCaffrey right now over Melvin Gordon and Leonard Fournette. I think depending on what platform you use, whether you're using ESPN or Yahoo, the rankings really do vary. And in terms of where Christian's, being drafted, early second round, but he was being drafted at the end of the second. So as these final 2 weeks wrap up, barring any injury, knock on wood, or any injury to people in the first 2 to 3 rounds of the NFL, or of the fantasy football draft, running backs. I think he is somebody that is going to outproduce a lot of people. His catching ability, everybody knows it, right? I think he caught 80 receptions last year.
Right.
But I think where there's room for growth with Christian is the fact that he didn't get a lot of carries last year. So, he had around 6 to 10 carries a game. This is somebody that really ideally needs to get 10 to 15 carries, which I think is a great number for him. He's not a bell cow, but he is somebody that needs to get and should get 15 carries a game. And with CJ Anderson coming into the fold, that's a guy that's a bruiser, right? He's produced, but he's gonna help Christian McCaffrey carry the load. So for me, I look for Christian's carries to go up. And I'm pretty excited to see that happen.
Yeah, I think a big part of Christian McCaffrey's success is going to be in what kind of league you're in. I think in standard leagues, he's probably at the bottom of the second round is a fair, appropriate ADP for him. In PPR, I think 100% he has top 3 upside. Just in the amount of touches that Rob Rivera, they've talked about that he is going to get and how much and how they're going to use CMC this year, I think he has the potential to absolutely break out and be a huge fantasy star.
Oh, and he's one of those people that if you get him in space, he's gone.
Yeah.
I was very worried with him coming into the league. There is always a shock factor for players when they hit the NFL, when they say, oh my gosh, everybody is fast. And I thought that potentially could happen to Christian McCaffrey. And somehow he still looks like he's pressing a turbo button when he runs and blowing guys away.
Oh, yeah. So that touchdown run he's had in the preseason was just so ridiculous.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that was absolutely insane. Yeah, good pick. All right, I'm going for late rounders again. The man, the myth, the legend, Jordan Wilkins.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I'll let you take the point on this. I can't take credit for it. The only thing I can say is I was a person that was rooting for Marlon Mack last year when Frank Gore was basically running the ball every week. And you were one of those people a few weeks ago that came to me and said, hey, this Wilkins kid, you got to check him out. And so I didn't do it, and was watching some film and was watching the Colts play, and he really jumped off the screen. So I'll let you go.
Yeah.
This is your guy.
Yeah. Jordan Wilkins went to Ole Miss, and I don't know, man. He had some talk coming out of the draft, not a ton. His thing is, and this is how I put it to Tex, when Tex finally called me and was like, okay, Jordan Wilkins, let's talk. And I said, what Jordan Wilkins is he, like, physical attributes wise, he's rounded out really well. But his big thing is his vision. His vision is next level stuff coming out of Ole Miss. Like, it's really impressive to watch. Tex definitely noticed it. He completely agreed. I've heard some comparisons to like a Matt Forte, which is, good Lord, if he could be Matt Forte, yes, please.
I could totally see that. I know that a lot of people wanted to say Le'Veon Bell, but I mean, I don't think he's as jerky. I think he is, in terms of Matt Forte, I think he is very fluid with his vision. So,
right.
And he's not going to burn you. Okay. Like, he ran a 4.52 at the combine. So,
yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible he gets on the field and he plays faster than he runs. That happens a decent amount. I think he's going into a good situation. I think Andrew Luck coming back obviously helps. They've really worked on shoring up that offensive line finally through the draft and free agency. And like, the backfield may seem kind of crowded, but the truth of it is that, and Tex and I completely agree on this, if I'm not mistaken, that I don't think the Colts organization likes Marlon Mack at all. I like Marlon Mack, and I think he's a fine player, but I don't think they like him, and I don't think he's going to be, like, given the benefit of the doubt if Jordan Wilkins continues to come in and show out, which he has done. Like he's been consistently good as a bell cow. He can do all aspects. He can pass block. He can catch the ball, and he can be your 1-2 back. That's fine. First and second round back. He does well in that situation. And Marlon Mack's hurt right now. Nyheim Hines has been dropping the ball like there's butter all over it. I don't know. I would be sad about Nyheim Hines because he could be Pharaoh Cooper from this year. The last preseason game, week 1, he dropped 2 punt returns, just fumbled it.
Nyheim Hines is gonna. I don't even know if he'll make the team. To be quite honest, to be quite frank with you, Marlon Mack undersized. They had kind of like the Chris Johnson hesitation with him. Like, does he produce when he's on the field? Yeah, he was pretty good, but kind of like the elephant in the room. Like, everyone knows you're undersized, and it's only a matter of time before you get hit. Whereas, Wilkins is prototypical size, great vision. He's not going to burn you. Opportunity, right? Like, this is preseason, and he's getting opportunity because Mack is hurt. And so he's running with the first team offense. He's producing, and he looks great. He's jumping off the film, off the tape, and people are taking notice. And his current ADP, I mean, where's he being drafted? Like,
well, it depends on if you or I are in that draft or not. that's really the killer there. Because I mean, if we're in the draft, I'm happy and comfortable taking him. Like in the same round that I would take Corey Davis, 10th, 9th, I'd be okay with a 9th round pick on him. Honestly, I think that he's going to be the bell cow there in Indianapolis. And I think that if you're able to get a bell cow, successful running back in a high powered offense, which is what this offense looks to be, I think that they had the potential to be top 7 running back in fantasy football, which is so good value wise at 9.
Well, and even if he was top 10, top 15, again in those rounds, me personally, I'd probably take him in the 7th or 8th round, depending on how these final 2 weeks go. But yeah, that's a solid pick, and I'm right there with you. I think when you talk about a bell cow, somebody that I'm going to go to as my next stud is going to be Kenyon Drake. This guy, again, is getting so much hate from what I've seen. People are going to call him a bust, this, that, and the other. I've loved Kenyon Drake ever since he came out of Alabama. We've talked about him before. He really burst onto the map this past season because of opportunity. Right. And, he's one of those guys that can do everything. He can catch the ball. He can pass block. He can run between the tackles. He can burn you on the outside. His current ADP, I think, is usually around the 4th round, 5th round. This is a guy for me that is going to be ranked very high. When you get past the David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, those guys, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, this is a guy that I'm putting right up there, man. I really think this is going to be a very big year for Kenyon Drake. And people are really going to be kicking themselves saying, man, I don't know what I thought Kenyon was, but he's vastly outplaying whatever it was. And so yeah, I'm huge on Kenyon.
Yeah, my biggest hesitation with Kenyon is this, and I think I've expressed this to you, is just
who's another person you have?
Let's see. Mike Williams. Yep.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. This was both of our favorite wide receiver coming out last year from Clemson, correct?
Tall, possession guy, red zone monster, really good at get the high point catches. I think that Keenan Allen was last year the exception, or was it the rule? Is he going to be consistently healthy now, or is it going to go back to what it was before, which was, Keenan Allen would look really, 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 really good, and then he gets hurt. And so where does Phillip Rivers go now? I think the Chargers are going to they're one of my dark horse teams, even with the injuries to Hunter Henry. I think I think they have the potential to be a really good offense. And I think Mike Williams has done really well in camp, everything I've heard. And I think he has the potential to be one of Phillip Rivers' favorite targets. And I think, Mike Williams he's kind of going undrafted, if not the final round of the draft. And I think he has the potential to be probably a top 20, top 15 for sure, just in terms of the red zone targets that he's probably going to get.
Yep, and everything out of camp, the tape that we're seeing, I mean, he looks fast, he looks healthy. So again, it just takes opportunity.
Okay, give me your next one.
Next one, a guy I'm very, very big on this year. If you look at his numbers over the last 6 games last year, he really, really exploded on the map. He is hilarious. If you have an opportunity, go on Instagram and follow my boy Juju Smith-Schuster. He is the next big marketable wide receiver in the NFL. We say this all the time about the Steelers. They know how to pick wide receivers and they know how to pick running backs. Juju Smith-Schuster is the next big thing. I'm putting him on here because I believe in him, but I also think that Antonio Brown could take a step back this year. I know that Martavius Bryant got sent out. Sorry, excuse me. They just brought in James Washington, somebody that Seb harped on for, I don't know, seems like since January, about James Washington, and then he went to the Steelers. So he's really had a good camp. But Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be an amazing player. Look for him to burst onto the scene the final 8 games of this season. He is going to rock out with his jock out.
Yeah, I could definitely see. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and just go to my next guy is James Washington. I had him on my list. I think that watching him this preseason has been insane. Like he has such a connection with Dobbs. I think for sure, 100% Mason Rudolph has used him. I think Big Ben will see the potential for him, just kind of chuck it up and let James Washington do his thing. And I mean, his stats against Green Bay, 5 receptions for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Tell me this. Does Mason Rudolph start this year?
No. I think he'll be the third on the depth chart. I think Josh Dobbs probably just makes the team as the backup. I know. I mean, he's looked good this preseason. Josh Dobbs has done a good job. Mason Rudolph he's done some good things, but I mean, he's had his issues. I would like to see Mason Rudolph playing with the type of talent around him that Josh Dobbs is. I definitely think that could be a big part of it, offensive line and whatnot. I mean, as an honorable mention though for studs, I think James Conner. Tex and I have talked about this. I think he has the potential to be, if anything happens to Le'Veon Bell, James Conner becomes gold. Fantasy, gold.
There's a few people that I am reaching for once I get the people that I want in the first 5 to 6 rounds. Wilkins from Indianapolis Colts, James Conner, backup for Le'Veon Bell at the Steelers. That's another really good honorable mention.
Yeah, I just think that it's absolutely possible that I just love James Washington. I have been so huge on James Washington since I started watching him at Oak State. And what? What'd you say?
Can't.
No, I can't, and I never will, because it's the perfect situation for him. If anything happens to Antonio Brown, I think James Washington becomes a big commodity. I'm not saying that Juju won't, but I think James Washington could be better than Juju.
Well, they're 2 different players as well. I think Juju is more of a deep threat. Not that he's a burner, but he's going to catch the deep ball, whereas Antonio Brown is really between the hashes, great route runner. And I think that's a good role possession guy where James can really excel as well.
I think it'll be really interesting. And that's just, I want it so bad. There's some players this year that I'm just, please, dear God, yes. 5 receptions for 114 yards. People have been talking about James Washington this entire preseason and how good he has looked. And I'm very excited.
Well, that kind of brings us to the flip side of this, right?
Yeah,
the duds.
100%.
And since we're already talking about Juju and James, I want to talk about my dud. This is somebody that I'm going to get probably rocks thrown at me while I'm walking down the street, but Antonio Brown, I think, he's been the number one wide receiver the past 4 years. Coming into this season, it makes sense that he would be at the top. I like two people over him. I like DeAndre Hopkins, and I like Odell Beckham Jr. Now, does that make him a dud being the third best wide receiver off the board? No, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to, be horrible. I just, he's kind of got a little bit of a, lingering injury right now. I don't know if it's his groin or his knee or something's going on that's limiting him. And, he's produced at such a high level. I just don't like him as the number one wide receiver off the board. I would totally take DeAndre Hopkins or Odell Beckham off the board before him. And I just don't know about this year.
No,
I'm a little bit hesitant.
I totally get it. One of mine is Big Ben. I think Big Ben is going to have a really rough year. I think, my biggest thing with it is like his off and on hesitation. Oh, am I going to retire this year? Nah. I don't like that. Like, that scares me because I feel like to be a really successful quarterback in the NFL, even with the pieces that are around him, Le'Veon, Antonio, Washington, Juju, a good coaching staff, I think that Big Ben's going to have a rough year.
I could see that. I would not argue with you on that.
And I'll go ahead and give you one of my next one is Julio Jones.
That's my next one. I love it. Keep going.
You and I have talked about this. I just I love my Falcons, and I don't like what Julio did this year with wanting to get paid more, which is fine. They just transferred non-guaranteed to guaranteed, which is cool, whatever, or signing bonus. And I don't know, man. Like, he had the yards last year, which is fine, well and good and all, but Julio Jones is a guy that's going to he'll give you a 30-point game 2 to 3 times a year, but then he'll give you 8 3-point games.
Yeah, I mean, this guy right now is all-time yards per game leader. I think he averages something like 98.6 yards per game. But to go to what you said, you have to be present on the field, and a lot of times Julio is one of those guys that, quite frankly, just isn't. I mean, he's either playing or he's got a foot injury, and so he's got something going on where he's hurt and just gets shut down. I think scheme has a little bit to do with it. He's getting up there in age. I just don't like the feeling. I know it sounds really weird, but there's just this feeling going on right now that there's not that spark that was there when Shanahan was there. Like, the guys didn't. Right now, I just don't feel like they know who they are.
I think that
I don't know.
I think Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be actually a pretty big deal. I think Matt Ryan's going to be very happy, and Julio runs routes really well. But an issue that Julio had last year was cardio, man. Like, he would come off the field on third down. I don't know if that was specifically Sarkisian doing that, but from what I've heard and seen, a lot of it had to do with Julio was just suffering from playing the first 2 downs, and he'd be dead by the third. So it's like LeBron taking defense. He just doesn't play defense most of the game. When he has to, he has to. But I think that Calvin Ridley's going to be a big deal. Throughout camp, he's been a very efficient, very clean route runner, and I think Matt Ryan's going to make big use of that.
Nice. Yeah, so you marked off one for me. Another one for me would be Dalvin Cook. This is a guy that, coming into the season last year, he was drafted pretty high, but he had injury concerns. I think he went in the 4th round of fantasy football last year. And for the first 4 weeks of the season, I think he was a top 5 running back. But then the injury concerns crept up, and lo and behold, he had a non-contact ACL tear, took him out for the season, or I think it was ACL and MCL. So he tore 2 ligaments, and he's coming back from that relatively quickly. But those concerns are still there. I know that you've said it multiple times that this season the offensive line for the Vikings just don't seem to be clicking. And, they still have Latavius Murray in the backfield. And so I just don't know if I believe 100% that Dalvin Cook is going to be able to bounce back like he, like people that have really made you forget that ACL is such a horrible thing, like, Deshaun Watson or AP, two other, people that bounce back from major ACL tears. And his current ADP, I think he's going a little bit into the third round, back of the second, depending on your league. So I just don't like that position.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go ahead and give you my honorable mention for top five, or for my top duds, is the Minnesota Vikings in general. Yeah, I just, their defense obviously is great. They have some really, really stud pieces, and that could do a lot for you. But if you're brand spanking new quarterback, Kirk Cousins, who doesn't do well under pressure, if he can't get the ball to all of these weapons because his running backs are constantly getting harassed, I just think that, man, it has the potential to be a really rough year because they've had a number of offensive linemen, both starters and backups, get hurt so far this preseason and in camp. And I just think that's a recipe for disaster.
Nice. Yep. I don't doubt that. I'm going to move to a different guy, Jerick McKinnon, another one of those names. I think for me, what I've noticed this season, or in the off season moving into fantasy football, is this guy's been up and down on the draft boards. Super, super high ceiling, right? Like if Jerick McKinnon is healthy, he's going to get a ton of opportunities with the 49ers. They brought him in for a reason, but the problem is he's just never, his size. You go back to the Marlon Mack complaint, is that he doesn't have prototypical size. He's got great hands, but he's just not always healthy. And here we are, 2 weeks away from the start of the NFL season, and Jerick McKinnon is kind of injured. So leaves a little bit of an opening for Matt Breida. That's one of those other people that if you don't have him on your radar, you've got to have him on your radar in the back half of maybe, the 9 to 11 rounds, somebody that could definitely produce. But yeah, Jerick McKinnon is definitely one of those duds. You're already starting to see his ADP drop. He's one of those people that I've already removed on my put on my do not draft list. So be very, very cautious with him. There's a lot of other players with high upside, people like Kenyon Drake that you could potentially get over Jerick McKinnon, a Joe Mixon, who Seb has been super high on this offseason. So I'm definitely not buying the fool's gold.
I like it. That's a good word for it. Yeah, I think that's all. Oh, I got one more. Alan Hearns. I know that the Cowboys kind of brought him in to be, I guess they thought he could be a number one. I don't see it. A lot of what I'm hearing from Tex and on my own coming out of camp is that Michael Gallup has been just a beast.
He's looked very, very good. And I think this is pretty crazy. I don't remember a time when so many rookie quarterbacks, rookie running backs, and rookie wide receivers have all looked really good. I mean, you can imagine some of the names that we're talking about here were drafted in the third, fourth round, So, you got Callaway who's showing out. Gallup is looking really good. The guy from the Bears.
Oh, Anthony Miller. Anthony Miller.
Crap. We were just talking about him. Anthony Miller's looking good. So, yeah, I don't know if the Cowboys drafted him or not drafted him. I don't know if the Cowboys brought in Alan Hearns to be their number one. He's really been a Band-Aid. I don't think the Cowboys wanted a number one because they wanted Dak Prescott really to go through his progressions. But I wouldn't be surprised if Hearns shows up.
You got any more?
For sure. Yeah, I got one more. I'm going to round it out. This is a guy that's a love-hate for me, T.Y. Hilton. 2 years ago with Andrew Luck, this guy's a top 5 wide receiver. Unfortunately, very little has been nobody's really talked about this recently, is Andrew Luck has not attempted a pass over 20 yards in the preseason. I'm just not in love with T.Y. Hilton this year. I could be completely wrong, right? He could be right back to old form, and Andrew Luck could be just sandbagging and not pushing his arm. But just something tells me that that they're just not going to be on the same page. And T.Y.'s going right around the middle of the third. potentially back end of the third. I probably would not touch him until the 4th, 5th round. And again, this is a dud. It's not saying that he's just going to implode and, wreck his entire season. I just don't think that at that position, he's worth it. I would probably take a Larry Fitzgerald or an AJ Green over T.Y. Hilton, in my opinion. I would also take
Jarvis Landry. I feel
Josh
like
Gordon and Jarvis Landry
this year. From what we've seen on Hard Knocks and in camp, it's been just like insane to watch. Yeah.
Love it. There's a lot of people that we covered, man. I like 12 days away from the start of the NFL or what we're pretty close, right?
Absolutely.
2 weeks?
I completely agree. Well, that's what we thought. Those are our kind of studs and duds. We'd love to hear what you guys think. I mean, you can check us out on any social media or on our website and, send us some questions that you may have about our picks and we'll, give you our reasoning. You got anything else, Tex?
No, just subscribe. We're back, man. We took a little bit of a hiatus. We're allowed to have a little bit of a, vacation, but
God, yes.
Our bread and butter is back, boys. We got fantasy football. We are family. What up, my brother?
You've been listening to the Backups Podcast. Follow us on Instagram, find us on iTunes, and visit the website at www.thebackups.com with a Z for more.